And we are live with another gameplay replay video, this time with Izzet Murktide in the modern format. Taking a look at our opening hand, and we have magic cards. But seriously, what do we have? We have Monkey into Counterspell, or Monkey into Shredder into Counterspell. 4 lands is not ideal, but with Shredder potentially can loot away some stuff. So definitely keeping this hand, although it is a bit awkward to have 2 of our basics in our opening hand. And our opponent is on the play. They lead off on Flooded Strand, nothing. We presumably fetch Steam Vents into Monkey. Opponent fetches Triome, passes. Triome into Basic Plains. No idea what's going on here. We attack with Monkey. Monkey connects, revealing Archmage's Charm. So it looks like we're up against blue-white control. I probably should have actually played Ledger Shredder here. Then we could have backed it up with Spell Pierce potentially. That said, we just let that removal spell happen. But Ledger Shredder should probably already be in play. Play Ledger Shredder here with protection up. Opponent goes. Plays nothing. Doesn't even play Supreme Verdict or anything here, so this could be something like a Wandering Emperor, but we have Expressive Iteration. Get to play Bobble. Get a loot trigger here. Choose to pitch. All these cards are good, so we pitch a Bolt, which makes some amount of sense, but we really do need reach sometimes in this matchup, so go ahead and swing at our opponent for 2 here. They play Wandering Emperor. We Spell Pierce it, so we kind of sniff that one out. Not surprising. Opponent going for Teferi. We play a Counterspell. Do they have an answer? Probably not in the main deck. Blue-white doesn't usually play something like they have Flooded Strand on top, so they'll get to play their 5th land next turn, potentially slam Teferi. We play Expressive Iteration. It's possible that I should have kept Ledger Shredder there, just to have maximum amount of threats. Swing in for 2 here. Once again, having double Unholy Heat. At least representing like we have Counterspell, although we actually have reality, just a couple copies of Unholy Heat chilling. We have Darcy, go to swing in. Should have probably held on to that basic land, or that fetch land, just to have something else to pitch if we double spell here. So we surveil, put land in the yard, do that, put the other war in the yard, find Counterspell, put land into play, which once again was also foolish with our sequencing. Our opponent goes for Solitude. We counterspell it. And opponent's under a ton of pressure if they don't have Supreme Verdict here. And Supreme Verdict has actually been a card that some of the blue-white lists have been moving away from. Chalice on 1, yeah, whatever at this point. Opponent plays Dress Down. Go ahead and pitch the 1-drop, since they were so nice to Chalice on 1 for us. We swing for 4 here. When I played Murktide here, I don't think I quite understood how Dress Down worked, although they subtlety here at a random point, which was kind of whatever. They have Solitude, so we're going to start getting blown out a little bit here. Would have been nice to have Murktide as an 8/8 potentially, so maybe I should have waited a turn. We play Fiery Islet and fetch. We draw Spell Snare, which not the best, but swing with both of these. Opponent blocks. They go to 3. They swing, so we're just kind of trading life totals right now. They put Kahira in hand. We have a bunch of stuff we can't cast. So, once again, if this Murktide was an 8/8, we'd be in a lot better shape. But they have Kahira, now they're going to start gaining life. And at this point, I concede because we're stuck on a bunch of lands. Once again, if I had played this Murktide correctly and we had an 8/8 in play, we'd be in a lot further ahead. Potentially even they'd be dead. So, really shouldn't have played that under dress down. Creatures lose all abilities, which includes Murktides enter the battlefield. Whenever enter an instant or sorcery enters the battlefield, gets +1/+1. So, I think I did that more as a testing thing because I don't think I'd ever actually seen dress down and play against a Murktide. But still, wrong play to make. Good thing to know in the future. Sideboarding, we basically boarded out some of our bolts and holy heats. We brought in things like Blood Moon. We brought in the copy of Mystical Dispute, etc. Left the Fluster Storms at home because Blue-White doesn't play a ton of actual hard counter spells, or they play things like Dovin's Veto, which just can't be countered anyway. And then leaving one Murktide in the sideboard just because Rest in Peace is a thing that Blue-White likes to bring in these matchups. So taking a look at our opening hand. We also brought in Subtlety and I believe Fury. Ragavan, Expressive Iteration, so we have plenty of early pressure. A couple copies of Consider plus Expressive Iteration, so we have early pressure on our opponent, plus we have lots of card selection, so pretty decent overall opening hand. Opponent does not have the Prismatic Ending. We draw Murktide, which, while it's not the best, is fine overall. Generally want to draw that a little bit later in the game. We reveal Memory Deluge. Go ahead and do that. Probably might have been correct to actually play Spire Bluff Canal there, but cast Consider, Bend a Bauble, immediately draw a Ledger Shredder. We'll get our decision to bend the bauble, but we hit a Supreme Verdict off of our opponent. Cast the Ledger Shredder, get Basic Island, cast Consider, pitching, what, Murktide Region at this point? Nope, either Ledger Shredder. Once again, probably not correct, but might have been correct to pitch the Murktide Regent itself. But we have plenty of pressure in play at this point. Blood Moon potentially to back it up. Opponent goes for a Ganjo, which is obviously uncounterable. We play Expressive Iteration. Play out Blood Moon. Pitching that. They have no access to no white mana. We only have access to one blue mana plus thing. They have Rest in Peace. We hit them with the Spell Pierce. They pay for it. So goodbye Murktide being a useful magic card. That said, we do get to dash a monkey here. Put them under pressure for 4. We Subtlety off the top of their deck, which I'm sure they would love to draw to be able to deal with our board. We dash a monkey again. Once again, this Spell Pierce starting to look pretty mediocre overall, but still potentially could help. They have a Solitude here, which they can't cast. Their Chalice off the top of their deck, which I'm sure they would have loved to have. Otawara, bouncing Blood Moon. We cast a Consider, find Counterspell. Expressive Iteration, so opponent is going to find yet another blue source, which is fine. They now get to cast potentially Solitude next turn, but we go dash the monkey, go to combat, swing, swing. They go to cast a Solitude, we counterspell it, have a Mystical Dispute here potentially. They cast Archmage's Charm, which is an interesting time. Pitch, cast that. Okay. We cast Spell Pierce, and we win the game. So, Blood Moon wasn't terribly effective there. It did buy us a little bit of time until they had to auto-wire bounce it. But as you saw, we both kind of got hit a little bit by Blood Moon there. Alright, back here for the third game. Taking a look at our opening hand. Blood Moon, Ledger Shredder, Expressive Iteration. This hand is a little bit slow and has no counterspells, but Subtlety to potentially answer an early Teferi, and the first couple turns are usually developmental turns, so I think this hand's probably a keep, especially with our iteration potentially draw us to our third land. Our opponent leads on Hallowed Fountain, pass. We play Spire Bluff, Canal, pass. Opponent plays Polluted Delta, pass. Could have played Ledger Shredder here, but might be better to hold up Counterspell overall. Opponent setting up to potentially play around Blood Moon. So we choose Cast Iteration here. They just let it resolve. We get Mishra's Bauble, and I'm not going to crack the Bauble yet because, well, no reason to really. Opponent gets a basic island, basic plains. They have Chalice on one, which is obnoxious, but we have no one drops in our hand, ironically. And then we draw, okay, cast Ledger Shredder, hold up Counterspell here. It would have been correct to actually play a second copy of Ledger Shredder there just to get more threats out of our hand and to have looted away this go ahead and play that in. Did this mainly to be able to play both Counterspell and Mystical Dispute in the same turn. And we pitch Drain Regis Chainlord just simply because we can't do anything with it. Okay. Get a basic island. Cast Ledger Shredder. Our opponent casts a Subtlety. We counter it with a Mystical Dispute. Weird exchange. Goes for Prismatic Ending, we just let it go. Considering we have other threats in our hand still. Play Ledger Shredder out, hold up Counterspells. I have been correct to actually hold up Subtlety in this spot just to play around certain things. Let's go ahead and get in for one here. Opponent holds up the Wandering Emperor. We hit Counterspell. Okay, opponent goes for Teferi Time Raveler. Try to hit a Counterspell on it. We also could have potentially hit Subtlety on it if necessary. Spell Snare a little bit awkward. Go ahead and Subtlety this to the top of their deck. Choose to put Subtlety on top, or Subtlety on top, sorry. Now we're going to be looking for a Counterspell. Don't find anything here, unfortunately. Go ahead and decide to cast Murktide Regent instead of that. Oh, we can't cast Consider anyway because of the Chalice in hand, or Chalice on the board. Put pressure on our opponent. Our opponent solitudes away our Let's Cohere in their hand. We cast Iteration. Go ahead and do that. Get to put another threat into play. And then we just continue to bash away at our opponent's life total. And they draw another Solitude. Sure. With Cohere back up, we get to loot away some lands here potentially. Opponent swings in. We have no reason to attack right now, so now we're in kind of this weird board stall state. Fury will help us a little bit. We get to kill a Solitude and a Kahira as long as it resolves. They have, looks like Subtlety to buy themselves a turn. Put it back on top naturally. Cast that to loot away. So we get the Fury back in our hand. Growing Ragavan. Pitching Ragavan. Mishra's Bauble. And we're kind of able to stabilize the board here as long as they don't draw anything this turn. And now we get to Fury away. Once again, Solitude and yeah, Gemstone Mine on top. So unless their card in hand is relevant, we get to loot. Once again, looting away lands, looting away lands. Opponent drew yet another Subtlety. Back and forth game continues. Although next time we guarantee no, it's going to resolve. So, opponent's got all the elementals going here. Cast Furious George, once again killing those two. Get to draw. Yep, get rid of that. Get rid of Dragon Rage's Chandler. It's going to have Counterspell on top, which is annoying, but doesn't help them on the board as is. Choose to attack with a 5/7 here. They could potentially double block, although it wouldn't do them a lot of good. Put them to 6. Our opponent drew Counterspell, and they have Gemstone Caverns in hand, which is an interesting card out of blue-white control. And then we cast Dragon Rage's Chandler, cast Blood Moon, which really doesn't matter, but Brazen Borrower is quite a nice draw. Again, swing in here, force them to chump block. Could have potentially attack with the Fury as well. But it feels like we're far enough ahead at this point that with Counterspell likely locking it up. Yep, they go to 3. And then they draw Prismatic Ending, killing one of our things, which is fine. Didn't fight back because, well, they have Counterspell anyway. And Braid. Swing in. And got there. Nice to beat blue-white control with Murktide. These are always among the more interesting matchups. It used to be the old Grixis Death Shadow versus blue-white control matchups were kind of close and interesting. I think it's generally thought that blue-white is slightly ahead, but I do think this matchup is very, very close. Obviously, the better the skill of the pilots, the more interesting the match is, but very good matchup overall, and wanted to kind of highlight it here on this playthrough of Izzet Murktide. Alright, back for our second match on this replay, taking a look at our opening hand. We have Counterspell, Lightning Bolt, Brazen Borrower. So we have most of the elements we want for a decent game plan. A little bit painful of a mana base potentially. Really only Spire, Bluff, Canal not costing us life, but seems like a pretty reasonable hand overall. Opponent leads on turn 1 Tide Shaper. So we're up against Merfolks. Play that. We could potentially play Mishra's Bauble, but we really want to pair that with either a DRC or a Ragavan, or DRC or a Ledger Shredder down the line. Go ahead and bolt it. Put down that, seeing Ether Vial on top of their deck. We draw a monkey. They play Ether Vial. We try to counterspell it. Go ahead and start dashing monkeys. Start to get a little bit ahead on resources. They dismember, which is fine. They're stuck on lands. Well, they have Mutavault Bastion for 1. Go ahead and do this. They could potentially have attacked with that. We go ahead and cast Brazen Borrower. Brazen Borrower starts the pressure. We play DRC. They cast Miscolor. We're going to counter this just because we know they're stuck on things anyway. And they concede as we have too much pressure, and their mana is very awkward at this point with Mutavault. One of the downsides sometimes of playing a card like Mutavault is, even in a monocolor deck, can kind of hurt you a little bit. Alright, looking at game number 2, we sideboarded out a lot of our counter magic. Counter spells, Mystical Dispute, all that nonsense is kind of out of the deck right now. We brought in our subtleties, our furies, engineered explosives, basically anything that's interacting with the board. The problem with a deck like Merfolk is, much like the old Humans decks used to be, the deck's generally playing some number of Cavern Souls, 4x Ether Vial, so counter spells get very awkward very quickly, unless you're fighting a counterspell war over, things you need to resolve, and even then, they're a little bit favored. A lot of times, they're only running Force of Negation and Subtlety as their kind of counterspells, so not necessarily worth leaving in counter magic. Taking a look at our opening hand, Fury, Engineered Explosives, couple Baubles, and a DRC. The hand's okay. We get a couple Scries with DRC plus redraws. So I think this hand's reasonable, and Fury obviously is one of the better cards in the matchup potentially. Once again, we talked about counter spells being garbage, and then they immediately open on Ether Vial and stuff. We see an Abrade on top, which we choose to keep. Now Abrade is a reasonable card in the matchup. Whether we go after Ether Vial or just their various different things. We know they have a Merfolk Trickster coming up, so as well as a Svelun. There's the Abrade, there's a Consider, play the basic island. No reason to attack, as we know they have a Trickster coming. As soon as they tap low here, I think we take the opportunity to blow up the Ether Vial, simply because it limits their mana a little bit. They get to tap this down, which is fine. They play Svelun. That makes it more difficult to kill their creatures as well, other than obviously this Engineered Explosives. We go ahead and find another DRC. Cast Fury, killing Svelun. Just because them drawing cards is kind of terrifying. Go ahead and cast EE on 2. To use all of our mana this turn. And they go for 4-point beatdown. So we dash Monkey. Go to combat. They play Dismember. Once again, still holding up EE. They just continue with the beatdown plans. Quite likely they have other 2-drops in their hand. But we're going to lose this race eventually. The 4 they just have another Svelun. So we choose to fetch. Send to 7. They go Mutavault. Petty Theft, bouncing Svelun. They still continue to attack. We probably trade here with Mutavaults. Opponent plays Svelun again. We have Unholy Heat, which kills Svelun. Hits them for 3. Pass the turn. Let them attack. Once again, they play Ether Vial. We blow up Engineered Explosives because we have the mana at this point. Go ahead and swing in for 3. They have a Trickster. Kind of defeats. This really was a dumb play here. Because while Trickster doesn't get to do anything, it does just kind of get to block this for free. So this was bad timing on my part. And sure, I put a 3/3 Murktide into play, but then if our opponent has anything here, we're just in trouble. They have Silvergill dipped, drawing a card. we do that. Can't attack or we're dead. Once again, awkwardness with dive down. And they just have things to give all their things island walk. So we're dead. Back for the third game with Merfolks. Against Merfolk with Murktide. Interesting opener. Early pressure, but way too many lands. This hand's probably a mulligan. Nope, I choose to keep that hand. Interesting. Opponent subtleties it off the top of the deck, so we put Ragavan back on top. We cast Ledger Shredder. They cast Dismember, sure. We go ahead and dash the monkey. Can monkey take over the game? Another Dismember that they probably wanted. Opponent stuck on one land. We dash monkey again. Start hopefully taking Merfolk off the top of their deck. Nope. Mutavault returns to her hand. Opponent still stuck on one land. Go ahead and dash the monkey. They still have no answer for it. Now we finally start stealing Merfolk off the top of their deck with Master of the Pearl Trident. Opponent's still stuck on one land. Now they have to pitch cards. Chalice of the Void, which would be very unfortunate for us. They subtlety Ragavan again. We go ahead and cast Consider here. Ragster back to our hand. Get to dash it. Continue the beatdown plan. And we cast Harbinger. Bounce monkey to our hand again. And the opponent concedes. You could see how this game easily could have gone south if our opponent had gotten this Chalice down, if they'd gotten more than one land, etc. And this is the kind of game that when people talk about Ragavan not being healthy for the format, this is what they're referring to. Your one drop being able to steal your opponent's plays. Very powerful. Banned in Legacy for a reason. How many days it has in the modern format remaining, who knows, but you know, sometimes you just get a runaway Ragavan game like that. I know as a burn player, I've certainly had that happen to me on a number of occasions where I'm stuck with like all of these Skewer the Critics and Lava Spikes and Boros Charms in my hand, and my opponent's just dashing this monkey, taking spells off the top of my deck, beating me down with my own cards, and kind of winning the game that way. So one of the downsides of playing against Ragavan is, yes, the dash vote mode can be really annoying in these situations. And I mean, they tried, they had subtlety, they had dismember, they had subtlety. Can only have so much creature interaction in your deck, and if you can't get blockers down, well, you just die to the monkey. All right, back for our third match in this replay of Izzet Murktide League. Pretty reasonable hand overall. We have Ragster plus removal spell, a couple copies of Consider. 3 lands, so seems pretty decent. Opponent mulligans to 6. Burn Catacombs into Blood Crypt into Ragavan. So we kill Ragavan, or they can untap with an Undying effect, and then they just cast Fury with an Undying effect. And now they have a 4/4. So we have to figure a way to kill a 4/4. We play Dragon Rage's Channeler. Choose not to chump block here, which may or may not have been correct. Once again, looking for a copy of Unholy Heat or Bolt. Consider, we find Ledger Shredder, pitching that. Find Counterspell, once again, not really the card we're looking for here. Looking for Expressive Iteration. Bobble, get to play that. Did kind of mess up here. I should have done this stuff second main phase to be able to play in the block here. To buy us another turn potentially. Instead, I end up attacking with that. They have a Grief coming down next turn. So they cast Grief, pitching Thoughtseize, and they get to undie that as well. And at that point, we are just kind of toast. So, you know, they get to hit us down to 3, and then we have to find 2 answers to creatures that are both lethal in and of themselves. So mistakes were made that game, but you know, when you're having to dig to an answer for a 4/4 Fury, and really the only cards in your deck that can do it are Unholy Heat or an 8/8 Murktide, and you don't have time to do it. Not doing this until our second main phase might have bought us another turn. Or they could just potentially have had their last card in hand, could have been a Bull or Fatal Push, and this just gets out of the way anyway. But that attack for 3 was kind of meaningless. We needed really to chump block to buy another turn and hope to just find an answer to this Fury as quickly as possible. Alright, back for our second game. We board out Spell Pierces. They're okay, but counterspells and this kind of Spell Pierces and counterspells are a little bit awkward in that in the mid game they're fine, but in the early games when you're really struggling to deal with your opponent's big dumb idiots, or they have the explosive draw, you'd have to hold up Spell Pierce at the right time. That's not always possible, and they can always clear it out with grief before using the Feign Death effect. So we go ahead, we're on the play. See hand of a bunch of interaction, no creatures, but we do have plenty of card selections. This hand should be a reasonable keep. We lead on Mr. Rainforest. Our opponent goes turn 1 Ragavan as bait. We cast Unholy Heat. Then have Brazen Borrower potentially to bounce and evoke creature. Go ahead and draw the 3rd land here. Kind of this feels like a mistake here. I probably should have cast Expressive Iteration. They have Voidwalker, which is whatever. We bolt it. They go ahead and fetch for a basic mountain. We have Unholy Heat. Okay, we have a monkey that we could probably cast here, but they cast a Seasoned Pyro. Pitching a land and up another Pyromancer. We go ahead and bounce the token, cast Ledger Shredder, cast Expressive Iteration. See, dive down, Dragon Rage's Channeler land, cast the DRC, bin another monkey, because monkey's kind of useless at this point. At least we're kind of at the point of game where our opponent just has plenty of blockers. They now get to cast a Fury, killing our Ledger Shredder. Don't get to really attack in here. We have Unholy Heat for the Fury, get in for 3. Plus we have a copy of Brazen Borrower. Opponent has Terminate, which is fine. They cast Grief. We cast Dress Down, which causes their Grief to lose any abilities. They swing in for 2. Go ahead and Unholy Heat the Grief. Dress Down dies. We draw a Fury of our own. Choosing not to play the Fury here, which may or may not be correct. Opponent plays Terminate, which kind of forces our hand. We still don't play Fury. I don't know if I like that. Okay, so we're down to 5 here. They play E on 0, or on 1. We finally play our Fury. They just have Undying Malice, so we bolt it. Okay, now we have a lethal threat. Do they have an answer to our Fury? And the answer is, it looks like a Fury of their own. Opponent gets to get furious here. We at least have the Unholy Heat to potentially answer it if they don't have that dying effect. So we upkeep it. They have nothing. However, keeping in mind they have those Seasoned Pyros chilling out in their graveyard. Iteration, finding Shredder, and Spell Snare. Spell Snare is kind of come and gone as far as its usefulness in this matchup. They might have a couple of Dothies hanging out, but now we've got some tokens we got to deal with. Opponent starts the beatdown playing with the tokens, and if they have Bolt here, we're just dead. Put us to 2. And play Croxa here. Well, we're not dead to this Croxa trigger because we can Spell Snare it. But, you know, they just basically escape it, and then we're dead anyway. So, a little bit of a grindy affair. Maybe you're supposed to leave in some amount of counter spells for these situations, but Croxa got us here. So, it's 2-1 with this set of games. Thought we'd highlight these ones because they were the more interesting ones of the 5 in the league overall. And just a reminder that there's a lot of play skill to Murktide, and that's why other people like to play it. Did we play the best in all the spots? No. There were certainly some spots involving Dive Down in particular that I needed to learn a little bit of lesson with. But overall, was pretty pleased with this set of games and kind of got to see some different matchups. Not just seeing like mirror matches and burn in every matchup, but actually seeing, Scam, Blue-White Control, Merfolk, all decks you might run into on occasion. So, nice to see these matchups in play. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hope to see you for the next video on MTG Nexus.